Some of you might be aware of these 6 capabilities and have seen them. Some of you might not have, which is absolutely fine. We have lots of resources and loads of things have gone out around how we can use these 6 capabilities to help observe and watch some of the core skills in action. So what we wanted to do really is, we've got to this point. We've got to the point of the core skills. We've got to the point of the capabilities being showcased in action. And we're now starting to talk about the opportunities and experiences that we can afford our players to get better at these things. So now we've identified and seen that there's things that we might want to get better at. But really now it's about how do we put on different opportunities and experiences for the players to be able to do these more often, and get a variety of these things happening, and variety of challenge around these things happening.
But you can see some of the returns from those formats of the game on what your players might need. Now, look, if you're playing 3v3 and lots of you work in the 11v11 game, you're obviously going to lose a lot of realism when we're talking about receiving skills, as an example, because 6 players on the pitch is far different from 22 players on the pitch, and the thought processes and the distances and everything else is going to be far different. But in terms of kind of player development and some of the experiences that your players might need, we just felt that this was quite important to kind of highlight the outcomes that you get from playing different formats of the game in different environments. Yeah, and we also need to recognise from an out of possessions perspective what we get as well. So, you're unopposed in a 3v3. So what does that mean to some of the out of possession core skills? So again, I'm not going to talk all the way through this, but again, it just gives you a flavour for, in that period of time, 30 minutes, if I'm playing 3v3, this is what I might get from an out of possession perspective if I want to support an individual.
We're gonna choose one player each, and we're going to focus on a player. This player is just a player that's been chosen, and really a vehicle to allow us to show you our thought processes around how we might go about improving receiving skills through a difference and variety of opportunities and experiences that we might afford the players. So what we would like you to do is consider these 3 questions throughout myself and Lee showcasing our case studies. What stands out for you? What do you notice? And what might you do as a coach? Because what's really important in this is that this is not about us and what we do and us being right, wrong, or indifferent. It's about us showcasing some ideas and you thinking about how that might work in your environment, how it might not, how you might adapt or change it. My case study that I have chosen is Lucy. As you can see, Lucy is currently a number 7, but she also has played a variety of times a number 10 role. Her position is fine when receiving when her back is on the touchline. So when her hips are open, back's on the touchline, she's quite capable of receiving on the back foot, facing up a defender 1v1 and going at them to either deliver a cross or get inside the box. So Lucy's quite comfortable at that. What we want to do is, how do we get Lucy faced up more? So what things is it that she's not quite as capable of? So in the next picture, you'll see a little bit of a difference in the receiving. You'll now see that the wide players come slightly in off the line and is now playing with their back towards goal. And the pressure looks different. The time and space looks different. And what's around the player looks different in terms of the support and the players they have around them. So I've put a big question at the bottom there around the symptom or cause. So sometimes the player can't receive under pressure. It's sometimes a symptom of something happening. What is that? What is the cause of that occurring? And I think sometimes we make those generic statements without actually knowing the detail that sits behind it around what is it that I need to help Lucy get better at? What does Lucy need to do more often? So now I'm starting to think about the returns from play and practice. So what things do I need to slide up the scale and what things might I need to slide down the scale in order to allow Lucy to get some real benefits and returns from my practice when putting on some receiving skills? Detail doesn't always have to be heavy. It can be a nicely worded question. It can be something very little and small that affects the player and affects their behaviours when trying to outwit an opponent. Because that's the key to it, really. What we're wanting Lucy to do here is outwit an opponent or opponents in order to advance up the pitch and create some momentum moving forward. And I think as long as we're clear as coaches of what it is that we're gaining from the practice, and what we're gaining from what we're putting on, the opportunity we're putting on, whether that's a 3v3 game up to an 11v11 game, and what we also might be losing and missing from that. Because the importance of this is a diet for the players across the season or across the week or across multiple weeks. It's not about just having the same thing to eat every single training night. So we're on a half a pitch, we play a 9v9 to finish, play 11v11 at the weekend, and this is what it looks like most weeks. Because from that, we'll get similar returns and similar things occurring. So it's about trying to vary that diet. What I hear a lot is we have to have our hips open in a perfect position to play forward. I think we just have to recognise good opportunities to play forward. If that's with our hips open and it looks really pretty and we can play onto the back foot and we can punch the ball forward, brilliant. If it's not like that, then let's find a way. Let's help our players find a way. And the quickest way and the best way of then us carrying momentum forward. So the second part of that then is Lucy not scanning prior to receiving? Does she not know where the pressure is coming from? Does she not understand the speed of the pressure approaching? Therefore, doesn't really then know where to take a touch. So if we go back into the detail, when do we give players detail? It could just be a simple question of, Lucy, what have you seen? What are you seeing as the ball arrives? What is it you're looking for? And I can then help her with, well, have you thought about looking for this? Or did you notice this? Really interesting. Next time we do it, have a little think about, or see if you can notice X. So now I can start to use this to start formulate some of my questions that I might ask. Because what I can't do is assume that Lucy's not looking. And on the video clip that we've seen with Farah, she does a brilliant webinar on receiving skills, and she talks about sometimes she doesn't have to look. And the best players now, when they do look, that's actually a signal for pressure to occur. Or players then know, defenders then know which side to go on. So actually sometimes players use a look as a decoy. And players now sometimes don't look at all. They scan what's in front to know what's behind. So I can't assume that Lucy hasn't checked or doesn't know what's around her. So I have to ask her those questions, and I have to try and prize out of her what it is that she is seeing. So moving into that then, I'm starting to now populate some of these thoughts and starting to think about where on the scale here in terms of the complexity of interactions. So the higher we go up, the more we get towards the 11v11 and the bigger game, the more complex the decisions. There's more players to think about, there's more decisions to make, there's more spaces. So the complexity of the interaction goes up. The returns from the format can go up or down depending on what it is I need. The repetition will obviously, as we've seen from Lee's data that he brought to life for us at the beginning, is the repetition, the lower amounts of players on the pitch gives me more repetition. The more players there is on the pitch, the more we get towards 11v11, the less repetition. But then the realism might increase with that depending on what it is that we might need. On the practice on the right-hand side, you'll see that it looks different. I've taken away a space, and I've done that on purpose now to try and give her a different challenge and a different problem. You'll also see that it's a 2v3 at this moment in time. And the player in blue is a feeder and is almost replicating a fullback stepping into that picture with the ball. How far do they step in? So there's a variety there of, do I let the fullback step into the picture and join in a 3v3? Or do I not allow that player to join in and they have to play the ball in before they reach the line? Now that gives then Lucy a completely different problem in terms of her timing. What time does she arrive in that area based on the touch now of this player? So now the two challenges look quite similar in terms of the picture that you're seeing in the number of players, but the challenge and what I'm asking of Lucy looks very, very different. The first one is quite a narrow pitch and really long, and it's a 2v2, and it offers some different ways to score. And I've done that to then, if it's long and narrow, I've got tight spaces, I've got only a certain amount of places I can go, and the amount of passes and where we pass and what that looks like will be different. You can see there on the right-hand side, I've made that pitch look really different and now made Lucy's touch come inside the pitch. So you've seen from Beth's picture here at the top of that practice, she took a touch inside the pitch. And you're seeing that more and more often, is that players are now coming inside the pitch and dribbling horizontally across the pitch to open up different passing lanes. So how comfortable is Lucy at doing that? And once we expose her in these practices, that might help us to see which of these does she need more help and support with. This is what they currently get. And do I know what they currently get away from what I actually give them? This is what they don't get. And I'm saying right now, because it might change. So we need to be aware of that. This is what they might need, but they also might not. So we need to be really clear. This is what I'm going to do to help. Have a little bit of a plan. Do I know what I'm going to do? Do I know what practice I'm going to put on because? And then how do I link all the things back together around what I've observed, what I want them to get better at, what opportunities I'm going to afford Lucy, and therefore how I might be as a coach to allow them to come out. So they're all the key little take-home messages that I wanted to leave you with, really.
Yeah, I was looking at some of them, and the position in the first instance is key, and the distance from their direct opponent was massive. So as the ball goes in, they then bring that player towards them, so stand them up. So then the timing to then shift the ball, which links to deception, to move the ball around that individual, is huge. So again, go back and look at some clips. We're not going to play that again this evening, but certainly if you look at where they receive their position in the first instance, either to receive it to travel, or receive it to take a defender with them to then shift it, and the timing of that dribble, if you like, is huge. I think the other thing to add to it, we're talking about receiving skills, is around the pass that goes in. And sometimes I don't think we put enough importance on the pass that goes in. The way I would describe it is painting a picture with the pass, or telling a story with the pass that goes in, because if the pass isn't right to the individual, it doesn't set up what they might do next. And I think as a player, you also need to be able to react to the pass that goes in, and that's the weight of the pass, the angle of the pass, the trajectory of that pass. There was one which probably went over 30 yards to Jack Grealish, but was perfect for him because he was able to receive it, wait for the defender, so then his timing to move around was huge. So I think there's some really big things for me that come out of that clip around receiving skills. The bit where he defends in 1v1 situations, and also 2v2 situations, he was very, very good at, intelligent in terms of how he did that. But the challenging bit for this individual was around receiving skills, and around tight areas of the pitch. So when the ball was won higher up the pitch in the opposition's half, reasonably compact, this was when this individual had one or two challenges, if you like, in terms of their development, but also highlighting some of the strengths. There was also a positional profile on those positions. So the 7 and 11 position, the person predominantly played as a left-sided player and was left-footed. Again, I'm not going to talk all the way through these, but it just gives you a flavour of some of the things that we wanted from the individual who played in this position from an in possession and an out of possession perspective. So I guess why am I showing you this stuff? Why am I giving you the player profile? Why am I giving you a position specific profile? Well, for me, this is what makes the ingredients of the support that I've given and the support that we gave this individual. And you can see that for me is some of the thought processes around the ingredients that we're going to put together to support this individual player. A lot to think about, I'm sure you'll agree. Would I say that we nailed it every single time that we work with this individual? Absolutely not. But certainly there was a thought process around how we support individual players and the ingredients that go into our practices and the work we do with this individual. So I'm going to show you some little practices. Does not rocket science, just one or two ideas around practices that I might be able to put on to support this individual and bring those ingredients to life. Several of you said you work on a full-size pitch or half a pitch. Certainly this was a piece of work that we did, working with 17 players, utilising half a pitch space, looking at working in tight spaces and specifically around the 7 and the 11 receiving. Obviously, we're working with that 7, who is a left-footed player playing on the left-hand side of the pitch. Some little things that we wanted to get across. We wanted to play in that tight space, and we put a 25-yard line in, because if you think about the ball going into that space, even when it's received, it's still going to be in a tight area. So we didn't want to utilise the person's ability to play in behind. There was a comment, I think, earlier on, do you focus on the strength or area of development? Clearly, there'll be times when there is space to play in behind in training on our match days for this individual. But for the benefit of what we want to try and achieve in terms of his receiving skills, his relationship with a fullback, his understanding of his position, his understanding of his timing to move inside, to stay outside the pitch, the first touch based on the pass that goes into the individual, the scanning and the ability to recognise what's in front of them, because invariably the scenario is the ball's always going to be received from behind or from the side. He's very rarely going to receive it when he's faced up already. So I think that was important, and the reason we put that 25-yard line in. This is me doing a little bit of analysis, trying to pick out one or two things in a professional game that you'd recognise, and that is Saka at the bottom of the screen as an 11 receiving, as a left-sided player from a fullback, where those goals are in, and you can see that 25-yard line in. So that's the same system that we operated, just replicating that scenario that you've seen on the screen. And I think that's the important around realism and relevance to the individual. Clearly, there's going to be an impact on the repetition, but it's around realism of the game, and that's the bit where just moving back into the practice by saying only the 7 and 11 can get in behind. The yellows wouldn't know that particularly, but from the blue perspective, that's where I'll try to look at getting that repetition out. So yeah, just to practice and bringing it to life around the reality of what it looks like. Was this one, just to talk you through it really briefly. Yellows keep possession. They score by passing into a target player, go back the other way to a target player. So essentially they're playing as a 5. You could argue it's a 3 in the middle versus 4, but a 5 versus 4. The reason I wanted 4 versus 3 in the middle of the pitch is to create some repetition. So what I wanted to recognise is when the ball is won on the left side, what does it look like on the right side when that person receives possession of the ball? And are they aware of that person in that end zone who could win it behind him? And I wanted to travel past that player in the end zone to penetrate that individual. So we're going through the end zone and then scoring, but then we can restart the practice of the yellow. So then the blue has to make a recovery run in to defend against it. Again, a little practice. Well, how does that look like in the game? Bottom of the screen there, that's Phil Foden. So you can see Manchester City versus Chelsea. There's a 4 versus 3 in that central zone. And you can see there's, I guess if you like the Chelsea, you've got 2 target players or 2 players to travel past. We'd set the goals back, obviously. But you can see that Phil Foden is receiving on an angle there. And he's got to think about preparing that space to be able to travel in. So again, that just links, if I just go back one, just links that practice in there to support this individual based on what that might look like in a space that might be operated in a game. Like the take-home messages for me, it will be really crucial around understand the player, understand the game, and understand the practice. When I've got that holistic understanding of the individual that I'm going to work with and what they need, that's first and foremost. Then it's the thought process. What does the game look like for that individual? Those 6 capabilities linked to receiving skills. How do I incorporate that? How much information do I need to give to that individual? Is it the simplicity, as Paul mentioned earlier on in the webinar, or do I need to provide a little bit more complexity to do it? And as a result of that, understanding our practices and what we do and don't get as a result of the practices that we put on.